Chicago's teachers union group, trip to Venezuela, praise of socialist leader slammed as propaganda tour. Oh, thank you so much, Chicago's teachers union, for doing a tour of a Potemkin village in which you can pretend like Venezuela is doing okay. And now, I'm just going to stop right here. There's going to be a ton of like far lefty, pro-socialist, pro-Venezuela people saying, Tim Pool has no idea what he's talking about. He's just another one of these people reading a story, thinks he knows anything about Venezuela. But wait, I've been to Venezuela, and I didn't go on a government minder tour. And nobody knew I was going. We went there like with a day's notice. And somehow, I walked in, they stamped my passport. At the time, it was back early 2014. You didn't need a visa as an American to go to Venezuela, but boy, did they give you the side eye. And I went in without issue, met up with some local guy, and we went around and did normal things. There were restaurants that had food. It was great. I got an arepa. It's like avocado. What they do is it's like chicken, pulled chicken, mashed with avocado, and then put into a corn, like it's like a pita, but it's like corn. It's an arepa. Amazing. Yes, there was food. Yes, I was able to eat, and the restaurant was packed, and it seemed fine. There were wealthy areas and there were poor areas, but I'll tell you what, I went to stores that had no food. I saw places that were out of supplies. I heard from people who said there was a shortage of basic goods. And I saw it. And I saw the problems, the potential for violence. I saw the protests. I filmed fire in the streets, and I had to flee the country from death threats. So I'll tell you this. There are certainly people who are going to highlight the worst of Venezuela. They won't tell you that you can go to a restaurant and get an arepa. But then you have these people who are going to act like everything's fine and the stores are full of food. They're not. Not only did I go there, but I know people who have been there. So shame on these people, because this is ridiculous. Maduro reportedly now is torturing dissidents. Okay, and I'm not gonna look up the source, fact check me on that one. But I know conflict journalists who are tweeting about this, and that's why I've heard it. So normally I don't like bringing something else. I have the source, but you can fact check me on that one. I don't have that pulled up. But let's read this story and read about why teachers union in Chicago is going to praise what is essentially an authoritarian dictatorship. Yeah, I'll go there. I'll be a little hyperbolic. Before we get started, however, head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work, because I am not a socialist. And because I'm not a socialist, that means I need to convince you my product is worth you buying. And then you exchange good old hard currency, green pictures of dead presidents, in exchange for me talking to you with beautiful words. Or perhaps you recognize this is a pay-what-you-will model of business. I produce a product, it's available to everybody, and if you choose, you can pay what you will. More importantly, though, I always say this, share the video. That way people can hear the perspective of somebody who spent a little bit of time in Venezuela to counter the opinions of those who would praise Maduro and the horrifying conditions of Venezuela. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I'll tell you this. I didn't have a government minder. We just kind of walked around and went to random places. And I saw a rather nuanced view of Venezuela, but I'll tell you what, it is bad. There's this place, it's called the Tower of David, I think. It's actually really cool. It was a skyscraper that was abandoned. So now there are people who've taken it over, and you have to actually walk there's no elevators. So they ride you on motorcycles up to like the 10th or 12th floor, and then you got to walk from there. But let's read the story. They say, the recent trip to Venezuela by a group calling itself a Chicago teachers delegation has upset some union members and expats who question the point of the tour and take issue with the group's praise of the country's disputed government. The four travelers who crowdfunded the July trip under the banner of the CTU met with Venezuelan government officials and educators, visited a commune, and were featured in local media. Yes, congratulations, you went on a government minder tour to a Potemkin village. They wrote online about wanting to connect with Venezuelan teachers, students, and unionists, criticized U.S. economic sanctions against the South American nation, and wrote admiringly of its socialism, its communes, and high literacy rates. And this is what really bothers me about Venezuela, is that they always say something like, the only reason Venezuela is doing bad is because of U.S. sanctions. Oh, come on, dude. They're an oil-rich nation. Look, they should have industry. They should have food. Yes, sanctions hurt. I'm not a crazy person. I get that. But to dismiss the problems of the country, and in fact, you could argue the sanctions are inverted. It's the country doing bad and the problems that led to America calling for sanctions. I don't want to play the political game and act like I know exactly why and how in the history, but I'll tell you this. I have seen repression. I was forced to flee the country because of death threats. I have seen people without food or resources. Let's read on. They say, critics say the group glossed over Venezuela's ongoing political and economic crises and were excessively complimentary of President Nicolas Maduro. That's right, the same Nicolas Maduro who, in a speech to his nation who are currently going without food, he pulled an empanada out of his desk and took a big old bite. I kid you not. The country, like, people are going hungry, and he pulls an empanada out of his desk on live television and takes a bite. Dude, can you wait 20 minutes before eating? And I know you guys realize this. I'm never going back to that country. I can't. So I have no problem calling out their psychotic dictator, Maduro, eating an empanada on television. Look, man, I understand there's nuance. I am being a bit harsh, but I think they're nuts. I could be wrong. I recognize that. But from what I've seen personally and read the news, man, these people have lost the plot. They say whose administration has been accused in recent United Nations reports of grave human rights violations and violence against dissenters. I am appalled the delegation representing themselves as CTU went to Venezuela not to support striking teachers, not to object to human rights violations, but to go on what appears to be a state-chaperoned propaganda tour, said Karen Moody, a teacher and union member. Bravo, Karen. You know, I'm not a big fan of unions, especially public sector ones, because the problem is they can't strike. I had a friend who was in a union in New York who said when they go on strike, they get fined by the government. They're not allowed. And I'm like, then why be in the union, dude? Just quit. And it's like, well, I don't know. You know, we're in a union. But I can, so that's my criticism of the restrictions. I think collective bargaining is fantastic. So good on this teacher and union member for calling out the insanity. Bravo. They say, and though the four travelers regularly called themselves a CTU delegation online, the union representing close to 25,000 people has sought to distance itself from the trip, stating the CTU did not endorse, sponsor, or fund the trip. Asked on WTTW's Chicago Tonight, that's Window to the World, I'm from Chicago, about some controversy surrounding the excursion, Union President Jesse Sharkey said, members go all kinds of places in the summer. This was neither an official trip nor something that was funded by the union. This is a group of people who are members of the CTU who decided to go to Venezuela. Yet the official CTU Twitter account retweeted some of the group's updates, including a blog post titled Introduction to the CTU Delegation to Venezuela. CTU also retweeted, oh wow, the CTU officially retweeted this. CTU also retweeted another post by teacher Sarah Chambers, one of the travelers and a member of the CTU executive board, which read, while staying in Venezuela, we didn't see a single homeless person. Aw, dude, that is absurd, man. I saw some pretty bad stuff in Venezuela. USA is the richest country in the world, yet there are homeless people everywhere. Over 17,000 CPS students are homeless. This is why CTU Local 1 is fighting for fair housing, CTU against VEZ intervention. Now, look, I got no problem calling out intervention, but you got to call it out and you got to call it out right. The U.S. is not the police of the world. While we certainly play a role in negotiations and in some capacity security for a lot of nations, I recognize that, the last thing the U.S. should be doing is policing other nations, regime change, war, etc. It's a complicated situation. But I have tons of respect for Tulsi Gabbard because I agree with her for the most part on this issue. But I recognize we don't have to praise Venezuela and act like they're good people. That's not the point. Why is it only the extreme ends? Either a Maduro is good and we shouldn't intervene, or he's bad and we should intervene. No, how about he's bad? I get it, but it's not America's place to go to this other country and do these things. If they start threatening other countries, then I understand, you know. But to only have the extreme ends, and more importantly, for a Chicago's teachers union, wow. You know what, man? I think everything's getting damn crazy in this country, like seriously crazy. To have people openly supporting a socialist dictatorship, Venezuela, where there are reports of torture and human rights violations, where they put people in these Potemkin village tours, and Americans going on that tour to support that. You know, I'll stress this. They're free to do so. Absolutely free. I'm not going to say they can't, but I will say I think they're insane for doing so. Because in America, you do have freedom of association. You do have freedom of speech. By all means, go and do your tour, and then I will make my response criticizing you. And that's the way it should be. No, you know, unfortunately, the way things have gone, like I just did a segment on Proud Boys Antifa. That's what scares me. I have no problem with a couple crazy people going and doing a crazy thing, because I'll call them crazy. But it's when the violence happens. So you shouldn't be going and praising Maduro. There's no excuse for this. You can talk about how it's not that bad. You can disagree with a lot of the international community who's calling for intervention, but to act like it's good because you went on a propaganda tour is absolutely insane. So they say this. That prompted a rebuke from another Twitter user. What the delegation fails to acknowledge is they used the CTU name to raise the funds, to set up meetings, to blog their findings. This was never voted on. They don't get it. Irresponsible and reckless. She added in her tweet, have you visited Venezuela and spoke to hundreds there? As a teacher, I teach my students to be critical thinkers, to get primary sources, listen to people's stories, and do research before just believing any news. I suggest you do the same. Well, yes, madame. I have been to Venezuela. I had a garbage bag full of Bolivar, I believe it was Bolivar's Fuerte, the money, where someone had to basically illegally take US currency for a massive stack of cash. It was nuts. We came back with huge wads of worthless trash. Yeah, I've been there, okay? So let me push back. Your government minder tour is fake news. The government is trying to get you to push this propaganda. When I went there, I saw a more nuanced view. I heard from the more upper class Venezuelans who were protesting. I heard from poor people. I witnessed the protests, and I was forced out of the country because of death threats. I've seen the stores, okay? It's not perfect. It's not pretty. It's not as bad as a lot of people might make you think, but it is bad, and Maduro is a bad guy. You know what? Here comes the flag from the far left. Bring it on. I still stand against intervention. And that's why, even though I know people who will sing this song of Venezuela's not that bad, don't intervene, I'll say, no, you're wrong. They are bad, but still don't intervene. Okay? Be rational. Don't lie for these people. We don't have to storm the gates. We don't have to shut them down and try and change their government, but we can at least admit they're bad people, right? Maybe that's step one. I got one more segment coming up for you in a few minutes. Stick around. I will see you there.